The entire genre of power pop is an anomaly, a genre entirely based on creating the best and most sophisticated pop songs crafted for mainstream audiences, usually with insanely catchy melodies and impeccable production. Yet they rarely reach the larger public despite having everything that the Billboard Top 100 likes, in a more nuanced, better quality. Cheap Trick with Surrender, The Knack with My Sharona, The Romantics with What I Like About You, Nick Lowe with It's Cruel to Be Kind, bands and artists that have a dedicated niche following but never seem to stay in the limelight after their big hit. But between all the acts in the genre, there is one whose influence and genius have reached people you would never expect. Katy Perry, The Wonder Years, Bowling for Soup, Death Cab for Cutie, and the list goes on and on. Their most famous single being featured in countless of movies, included in soundtracks and covered by thousands, yet while active they never reached mainstream popularity of the likes of his contemporary artists, always being just that tiny bit behind stardom but above the underground. Despite their impeccable talent for writing melodies for others and themselves, incredible storytelling and artistic cred, Fountains of Wayne never became a household name other than their single Stacy's Mom. Fountains of Wayne was formed by two fresh men who met at Williams College, Adam Schlesinger and Chris Collingwood. The name came about after a lawn ornament store in Wayne, New Jersey. While just being a dynamite duo, they cut together a demo which they sent to Atlantic Records. Atlantic liked the demo and signed the band, after which they recorded their commercial debut album, the self-titled Fountains of Wayne. The way the album came about is pretty funny considering the amount of bangers on here. It reminds me of Paul McCartney just waking up from a dream with Yesterday already written in his head. According to Collingwood,
basically, we started all this by writing a bunch of titles on bar napkins and trying to get the other guy to laugh. We'd get drunk and just sit there writing and laughing. We wound up with a list of hundreds of titles. Then we'd decide between the two of us who was going to take which song, and then meet the next night and see what we'd come up with.
Songs like Radiation Vibe, Joe Ray, and Leave the Biker were written in just half a day. The songs that went on to be featured on the album took about one whole week to write. I think you can already see from this, we are talking about some generational talents here. Collingwood and Schlesinger provide all the instrumentation on the recording, except for the bass guitar parts, which were performed by guest bassist Danny Weinkauf. The album took a whole ass $5,000, with some more spent on mixing. Nowadays you can't even get someone to start up FL Studio for $5,000, but even back then this was incredibly cheap for a debut album. According to Collingwood,
it was deliberate that we were going to write the album and record it quickly before we had time to think about anything. Prior to this, Adam and I had both been careful, serious songwriters, in the vein of Simon and Garfunkel. We were much more careful about the arrangements and everything. But when we decided to make this record quickly and spontaneously, we figured that since doing it so fast was such a stupid idea, the band needed a stupid name as well.
The album saw modest commercial success and high praise from critics, which, spoiler, could be the tagline of the entire band. The entire album is consistently great, not just good but great. I have seen someone describe the sound as grunge without the depression, which I think is apt. The instrumentation is fairly basic. Guitars, drum, some key, bass, and the fantastic overdubs of Chris and Adam hide the budget and personnel constraints this album had.
And it has not been released yet, except inadvertently on YouTube.
Some of the highlights include opener Radiation Vibe, which went on to be included in the 2021 edition of Rolling Stone's 500 Greatest Songs of All Time. Not bad for a debut album.
What I forgot to say, baby, baby, baby. Come on, what's wrong? It's a radiation vibe I'm putting on.
Sink to the Bottom, fairly popular single and fan favorite.
Sink to the bottom with you. Cars on the highway, planes in the air. Everyone else is going somewhere, but I'm going nowhere. Dead in
One of my beloved tracks, She's Got a Problem, a song that clearly displays the songwriting and lyricism on display here. It also shows how, despite their comedic tone and witty songwriting, they are more than capable of addressing serious topics.
I know a girl who should never be alone. She's a danger to herself, and I'm worried about her.
Speaking of songwriting, the duo had a strange way of doing it. Though Collingwood and Schlesinger shared co-writer credit for all original Fountains of Wayne material, for most of their career together, they wrote their songs separately. In 2005, Collingwood said,
We decided early on, it's better to not have arguments that some bands have where someone might say, I wrote 15% of that song, and try to figure out those numbers. It just seems ridiculous.
Schlesinger added,
We just agreed many years ago that if we were to have a band, we'd just split the songwriting to avoid having a conversation every time we tried to finish a song. But we really haven't collaborated as writers in years. And that's kind of intentional too, because we didn't want it to turn into a thing where people would say, Adam's songs are like this. We wanted the band to have an identity more than we wanted each of us to have an identity in the band.
Adam also wrote many hits for other artists, movies, and shows. I could spend an entire video just talking about enormous amounts of hits he has written in his career for artists like The Monkees, The Click Five, Nicki fucking Minaj, The Jonas Brothers, will.i.am, America. He also wrote 8 songs for the TV special, A Colbert Christmas, The Greatest Gift of All, and many, many others. When I said underrated, I did not mean it in the YouTuber clickbait way, where they make a video about Dark Souls and say that the game with 1 billion Game of the Year awards is underrated. I meant it in a way that both Adam and Chris could be considered as top 20 songwriters of all time, despite only people in the known hearing about them way. After their debut, they went on to recruit Jody Porter and Brian Young. This lineup would remain till the very end of the band. Despite becoming a real band, the duo continued to be the sole songwriters for all the albums they put out. After touring with acts like the Smashing Pumpkins, Sloan and the Lemonheads, the band released Utopia Parkway in 1999, named after a road in Queens.
In the summertime.
The album was different compared to their debut, as it was a concept album based around life in a modern suburb. Being a concept album, the duo had more opportunities to show off their clever and often witty lyricism. Dealing with themes like the mundane and idyllic existence of living in a suburb, coming-of-age stories such as Red Dragon Tattoo and Troubled Times, and aspirations for something more on songs like Go Hippie, the album was a much more focused and introspective album. This shift in tone and focus came about them being afraid of becoming a novelty band.
I think I was a little panicky after the first record, as being perceived as a novelty band. So I was trying to move away from making jokes on this record. That's why my contributions are more dismal.
When we were teenagers, we liked listening to Kinks records because we'd never been to England, and we got a sense of what it was like to live there. We really wanted to make a record that felt whole. We intentionally didn't include a few good songs, because once we started picking up on the thematic connections, we wanted to stick with it.
It had to do with reaching a level of maturity where you realize your own life is worth singing about. We spent so much time glamorizing bands like the Kinks, but what they were singing about was just everyday suburbia in England. There's this realization that you don't have to sing about Kensington for it to be worthwhile. The new album was definitely recorded more like a band. We had been touring with them for over a year after making the first record, and it felt like second nature when we made the new record and it sounded the way the band sounds. The progression from the first record to the second was so gradual that I didn't really notice until I went back and listened to the first album and realized it really didn't sound like a band.
Despite the change in direction and sound, the band stayed true to their melody crafting abilities. The title track, Utopia Parkway, sounds like a song early Weezer would make, a guitar-focused power pop song.
I got it made, I got it down. I am the king of this island town. I'm on my own, I'm on my way.
While Denise features a real earworm of radio rock melody and an awesome guitar solo showing off the technical ability of the band.
When she holds me, I can't help myself. Won't you tell me, do you love me, Denise? Whoa, do you love me, Denise?
It Must Be Summer reminds me of 60s and 70s guitar pop songs like Waterloo Sunset by the Kinks or a Stone Roses song.
It must be summer, 'cause the days are long, and I dial your number, but you're gone.
You can clearly hear this song's influence in the entire White Album by Weezer. After releasing the album, the band was dropped by Atlantic, which was followed by inactivity from the band. In 2004, Collingwood said,
When we got dropped from Atlantic, it's my fault that it took so long, because I wasn't sure I wanted to keep doing it. At the end of 4 years of the hardest work I'd ever done in my life, more traveling and being away from my wife the whole time, I had nothing to show for it. I got back home and I had nothing. I was broke, I was demoralized, I was exhausted. I think I just needed a year to recharge my batteries.
While on break, the band members went on to perform in other bands, notably Adam co-writing a bunch of songs for movies and producing albums for other artists.
Wait a minute, Susie, can't you see it's not good for me? I know that might be wrong, I'm in love with Stacey's mom.
In 2003, they released Welcome Interstate Managers, their big album. This album came about following a reunion for a cover of the Kinks' song Better Things for a tribute album. Welcome Interstate Managers is an album where I never skip a track. For a 17-track album, that's insane. Every single song is good enough to be in a top 500 songs of all time list, each with meticulously crafted melodies, harmonies, and production. The album features ballads, power pop, blues, acoustic folk, and many more. The album's blessing and curse was the fact it released at a time where pop punk acts like Bowling for Soup, Sum 41, Green Day, and others were incredibly popular. This helped the amazing single and everyone's favorite MILF anthem, Stacey's Mom, to finally propel the band to mainstream fame for a while. Unfortunately, this was also their downfall, as the public already picked their preferred pop-punk outfits and didn't give the band a chance to prove how they were. Not in fact just another dime a dozen Simple Plan wannabe band.
She ran away back in 78.
I don't want to discuss the single as everyone has heard it a million times by now, and the inspiration for the song is exactly what you imagined it would be. But the album, which unlike Utopia is not a concept album, has some really outstanding songs on it. The record has similar themes to the previous album, lyrics about suburban life, workplace frustration, nostalgia, and longing for a better life. The song Hey Julie is one of my favorite songs of all time. I think it has the absolute best melody of any song they ever made, which is high praise for a band that exclusively makes songs with great melodies. The song is probably one of the more well-known singles off the album, as it has been featured in countless shows like The Scrubs and others.
Hey, Hey Julie, look what they're doing to me, trying to trip me up, trying to wear me down. Julie, I swear it's so hard to bear it, and I'd never make it through without you around. No, I'd never make it through without you.
Another fan favourite, a song covered by even Katy Perry, Hackensack, is a ballad showcasing top-notch songwriting. Themes of unrequited love, idealization of a road untravelled, romanticization of the past, make this song just as relevant today as the day it was written.
But I will wait for you as long as I need to. And if you ever get back to Hackensack, I'll be here for you.
And this is true for all the songs written by Adam and Chris, a true sign of brilliance. Writing songs that work in a given movement or time period is hard. Writing songs that even after decades remain just as poignant is a Herculean task. Doing this tens of hundreds of times over one's career is something even the best of the best can't replicate. Dylan, Prince, Cohen, Paul Simon all have duds, some objectively terrible songs. But we can't say the same about the songs written by the duo. The album went on to be the biggest commercial success the band ever achieved thanks to the single Stacy's Mom. It is considered as the best album they ever made, one of the best albums of all time, and a prime example of power pop. If you are new to this band, I would highly suggest starting here.
It is choking under salt and dirty sand, and it seems the sun is hiding from the moon. Your daddy told you when you were.
The album was followed by Out of State Plates, a collection of B-sides. There isn't much to say about this album. It's more of the same as before with great songs. It has a Britney Spears cover if you are interested in that. The next mainline album, titled Traffic and Weather, released in 2007. This album had way less involvement from Chris compared to the older albums following his personal problems around this time. Chris was battling depression and alcoholism. In 2006, while on tour in Tokyo, Collingwood suffered a mental breakdown. During the 4-day which it lasted, he didn't sleep and experienced hallucinations.
I had a breakdown. I completely lost it. I was convinced I could see someone around the door, but when I followed them, they weren't there. It was just, depression and alcoholism and lack of sleep and kind of running myself into the ground. And that actually manifested itself really viscerally. And there was one particular event in Japan where I went crazy and I started hallucinating. I was in the hospital for a while trying to recover from that.
Reckless winter made its way from Staten.
Following up the comparatively huge success of their previous album was a hard job, especially with Chris out of the picture for most of the album. As I re-listened all the albums in a row for this review, this is where I was kind of burnt out. It's more of the same. Similar themes as we have seen since Utopia Parkway, and songs just as catchy, well written and easy listening as any other album of theirs. This album is often considered as their worst album, but the worst album of a damn good band is still a good album. Despite my comments, I still like this album, and if you listen to the band in moderation, it's everything you expect and nothing more. Therefore, I don't have much to say about it. This album did not sell as well as the previous one. This had less to do with its quality and more with people generally writing off the band as a one-hit wonder, plus the general public at this point reaching the climax of their pop-punk phase and just getting into their alternative indie rock era. 2007 saw the release of In Rainbows, Favorite Worst Nightmare, Icky Thump, and Graduation. Not to say the year didn't see albums by Paramore or the Fall Out Boys go on to be very successful, but if they had to pick just one pop-punk record, despite Traffic and Weather not actually being a pop-punk record, it wouldn't be their first choice. After touring and a live album with a now sober Chris, they started work on their final album, A Sky Full of Holes. With Chris not being present for most of the last album, he had to course correct on this one, becoming assertive on his ideas as a weird way to make up for his absence on the last record. The record created a lot of tension between the members, and after releasing it, Chris stated,
Every single thing about that record was a fight. It was not this blissful reconciliation that led to the release. It was a brutal thing, right up to the end. We'll see what happens if we end up making another record.
The relationship between Adam and Chris deteriorated to the point where they had to seek professional help to continue working together. Sort of like couples therapy, but for musicians. This album, unlike the previous two, is actually very different from past records. It's a much more acoustic-inspired project, taking inspiration from the previous tour they have done just before starting work on the album. When listening to the albums in a row, I was kinda asleep behind the wheel by traffic and weather, but this album, like a sudden crash, woke me up. It's the new direction I was hoping for finally being realized. Songs like Action Hero, Summer Place, and Firelight Waltz feel fresh while retaining that oh-so-wonderful craftsmanship we expect from Adam and Chris at this point. The more laid-back acoustic instrumentation really fits the band, especially after the decade of harsh, powerful-sounding radio pop they have been making. The band also uses creative chord changes, wonderful arrangements, and excellent guitar playing to create a sound not heard before by them, at least not for a full album. Due to great critical reception, the album did sell well, but because of the personal issues the bandmates were experiencing with each other, they unofficially called it quits by the end of 2013.
We've got the space if you've got the time and the summer place.
I wish I could end this on a brighter note, but Adam passed away from complications from COVID-19 in 2020. The rest of the band performed for the first time since 2013 at a charity event to raise funding for the New Jersey Pandemic Relief Fund in honor of Adam.
You ran away back in 78, just down the beach to the neighbor.
Fountains of Wayne is a band that comes once in a lifetime. A band who perfected songwriting to a level where their perfect melodies and hooks came out grading at some point. A band so good every track of theirs, even the worst ones in a perfect fair world, could go to number 1 on the Billboard. A band whose legacy will forever live on due to all the artists who were influenced or directly helped by Adam and the band. The fact that Fountains of Wayne remains an underrated but widely beloved band that never got what they deserve proves we are not living in a perfect world. Despite having some of the most amazingly well-written and melodically wonderful songs ever written, despite doing everything right in their sound to make it big, they never really did. And if there is one takeaway from this video, it's that if you haven't, give them a try. I promise you, you will find at least an entire album's worth of songs you will forever keep in your rotation, helping the legacy of this band to live on and maybe reach the level they deserved.
Was it just yes